Fantah. By Hadiza Bagudu. If you enjoy this story, please like, share and subscribe. Chapter 1. October 1st, 1884. The sun had almost gone down and no game caught. It wasn't a very good day for hunting, Hayah thought. He had been lying in wait all day long to kill something but still no luck. Those Bororo again! He cursed under his breath. They must have driven the animals further away. He had noticed their temporary settlements the previous day and instantly knew there were going to be trouble. It was the beginning of the dry season, and the open savanna grassland of Adamawa region was a known haven for cattle grazing. The Bororo nomads usually come around once in every 2 or 3 years to graze in the area, and each time they do, they upset the natural balance and order of the wildlife found there. The dry season was not only favorable for pasturing in that part of the savanna, it was also a very good time for game hunting, a sport which he loved very much. Hayah was a soldier in his early 40s and still very much physically fit, with the relentless enthusiasm of an adolescent. During the brief periods of calm experienced in the conflict between the Fulani and the indigenous Muscom people, he liked to go inland into the lush grassland for some solitude and game hunting. It gave him the peace and quiet he needed to rest, to reflect and recuperate. As he moved silently through the grass, he heard a sound which he mistook for some wild animal, so he crouched toward the sound with caution. But as he approached the area, he saw a cow, and the another. He parted the tall grass he was hiding behind and saw more cows grazing peacefully in an open area. Annoyed, he thought of going to meet the cattle rearer to give him a piece of his mind. But just as he was about to do that, he noticed a figure, not among the cows, but under a tree, away from the animals. It was that of a typical Bororo girl. She was tall, slim and had a light but brownish complexion common to the Fulbe tribe. Her face was turned away from him, toward the cows. She had a wrapper that was tied low around her waist and held together in place by lots of beads, also known as jigida. Her blouse was tiny, barely covering her upper torso, and was decorated with beads of different colors, and little colorful pieces of cloth were sewn onto it. Her hair was braided in cornrows of different sizes, decorated with beads of different colors. When she turned her face towards him, he held his breath. She had the most beautiful face he had ever seen. It was oval in shape, enriched with big eyes and a cute, pointed nose. Her lips were tattooed black and her eyes were also lined with dark kohl. Her cheeks were lined with 3 dots on each side. And on her ears were large round earrings. He put her age at around 14 or 15. She was so beautiful that for a moment he doubted whether she was human or jinn. Suddenly, there was an uneasy, but familiar calm around the place. With the eye of an expert hunter, he quickly scanned through the long dry savanna grass that was swaying slowly in the wind. And there it was, almost unnoticeable and blended into the brown grass, was a lion making its way towards the herd of cattle, moving slowly and stealthily without being noticed. The girl was obviously unaware of what was about to happen. She was so engrossed with her surveillance duty, that from a distance, her face radiated a calm and peaceful demeanor. He almost felt sorry for her, as she was about to be terrified beyond her imagination. Silently, but quickly, he drew out his bow and arrow and aimed straight at the beast. To his horror, he noticed that the lion wasn't going towards the animals, but towards the girl. A man-eater. He thought as he quickly dipped his arrow in poison and primed it on the bow, aiming at the beast. How could this be? There are only a few people living in this area except for the Bororo, who must have arrived in the past few days. But there was no time to ruminate. He had to act fast or else the girl would be dead. Suddenly, from its squatting position, the lion sprang towards the girl, just as he fired an arrow towards it. The cows started to run for their lives in different directions. The girl turned and saw the beast and let out a shrieking scream. Everything happened very fast, and at the end of it all, the beast lay dead at her feet. He then came out of the grasses and ran towards her. She was frozen stiff with fear. "Are you all right?" he asked, gasping for air. But she didn't answer. She was still frozen with fear and her eyes were fixed on the carcass. It's all right. It's dead now, he added as she lifted her eyes to meet his, with a terrified look still on her face. It then dawned on him that she couldn't understand him, as he was speaking Hausa to her, so he switched to Fulfulde language and asked her again if she was all right, while trying to calm her down. She must have suddenly come back to her senses because she immediately untied the veil from around her waist and covered her head, turning her back shyly, away from him. It's okay, he said again. The Bororo are known to be very coy, especially their women, and he didn't want to upset her. You shouldn't be coming out here alone to graze, you know. These parts are swarming with wild animals. Perhaps you should have come in groups, better yet, let the men do it. She still didn't say anything. So, he continued. This is a man-eater, which makes it even more dangerous to be out here alone. I haven't seen one in a long time, you know. He kept on talking for about 2 minutes without her saying anything in reply. Then, just as he was about to stop talking, from the corner of his eyes, he noticed that she quickly stole a glance at him before running away. Great! He exclaimed. She ran away and left her cows. Well, she will have to come back for them. So, sat down under the tree to wait for her return. Later that day, a young Bororo girl, dressed in a typical Fulani outfit, was walking down a path with a stylishly decorated calabash filled with milk, balanced firmly on her head. She moved gracefully without upsetting it. Hey Pillow, Wadu Kozum. She heard a familiar girl's voice beckoning and she turned towards the sound to see who it was. Fantah. What are you doing here? She asked, walking towards her and placing the calabash on the ground. Where did you leave the cows? It is your turn to watch over them. Oh, they are fine. Fantah replied, nonchalantly. You abandoned them again. Baba will be angry. Don't worry about them. She opened the calabash and took some of its content and started drinking. Wow, you didn't make any sales today. Fantah. Stop drinking the milk. Dada will know. She snatched the ladle from her and used the woven raffia to cover the calabash again. Where did you leave the cows? What if something happens to them? Common Diddy, you know that those cows are smarter than most of the boys in this village. Believe me, they are. What's wrong, Fantah? She asked her, knowing her sister was hiding something from her. I met a man. You did? Diddy gasped. They got up and started walking towards home. Yes. Oh, he was so wonderful. I thought you said all boys were stupid. Oh yes. But he is not a boy. He is a man. She said, with a dreamy look. Oh, wow. Her sister said in surprise, and Fantah told her about the handsome stranger who saved her life. Chapter 2. The evening sun casts its long shadow on the village of Ndukula, a quiet settlement of semi-nomadic Bororo, with less than 500 inhabitants situated 150 kilometers west of Marua in the lush savanna grassland of Fombina. The Bororo are a very close-knit clan and are usually related by blood and marriage. They are sometimes hunters, but mainly cattle herders who move once every 3 years in search of greener pastures for their livestock, to survive and thrive. Whenever they move, they take everything with them and completely resettle. They hardly ever spend more than 3 years in a particular place and almost never go back to any place they had left. They are believed to have originated from North Africa and kept going westward until they found themselves in the land of Fombina. A typical Bororo village consists of groups of thatched huts made of grass, sticks, and mud, and shaped like domes. Each ruga is a cluster of domes surrounded by a fence made up of tree branches beautifully woven together to provide privacy and protection from wild animals. There is usually one very large dome for the head of the house and a semi-large one for his wife and daughters. There may be one more for the boys in the family and finally a small round one made of mud called rumbu, for storing of grains. The family tree is made up of a father, mother, and children. Even though they practiced polygamy, it was very rare except in special situations. Also, marriage between cousins was common amongst them, as it was believed to foster family ties and keep their wealth within the family. They also hardly ever intermarry with other tribes. For that reason, every Bororo resembles the other as they share a common gene. They have a very loose system of government. Although they have a chief, referred to as Ado, selected by the elders of the village, decisions on matters affecting the village are usually made by the elders. The Ado is just a ceremonial head. Malam Buba was standing in front of his house just before sunset, waiting for his wife to bring supper, when his cows appeared from nowhere and started going towards their barn without anybody directing them. To his surprise, his daughter Fantah was not with them. Just as he was wondering where she was, a middle-aged man who appeared to be nudging them, walked towards him and greeted him. "Are these your cows?" the man asked. "They look like my cows," he answered him. "They led me here, can you believe it? Smart animals." "You don't say." "Well, the girl that was with them left so I brought them back." "Really?" "Yes." "You mean my daughter left my cows unattended?" he retorted angrily. "Yes, no," he stammered. She was frightened. There was a lion. "Do you know that these parts are dangerous? There are wild beasts everywhere. You shouldn't let your daughter wander off alone." Malam Buba gave him a quizzical look before yelling, "Fantah!" Enayam Baba, a female voice, answered from inside the compound. She came out and stopped at the doorway, surprised to see Hayah. It was the same girl that left him with the cows, and then she came and knelt down beside her father. "Did you leave my cows in the forest by themselves and wander off?" She didn't answer. "Go inside, I will deal with you later." It's not really her fault. She was frightened. There was a lion. Hayah tried to defend her. "A lion?" Malam Buba feigned surprise, as if he didn't hear him the first time. "Yes, a man-eater." "That is serious." "Yes. But You know, sir, you should not allow young girls to go out into the forest by themselves to rear cows. It is very dangerous out there. It is crawling with wild animals. Don't worry about that. We have hunters roaming about and they will take care of the beasts. Rearing of cows is a task for children and girls." At that moment, another girl, much younger, but equally as beautiful, came out with several small calabashes containing food stacked on each other. She knelt, greeted them and then started to arrange the calabashes on a mat. "Okay," Hayah said. He knew there was no point in trying to convince him anymore. "Now that your cows are safe, I will take my leave." "No, my friend, food is ready. Please stay and eat with me," Malam Buba offered. "Oh no, I must go. But thank you for the offer." "No, my good sir. In our culture, it is considered unfriendly for a visitor to leave a man's house at sunset without having supper with him first." "Okay." He didn't want to offend him. "I will stay for supper." "Thank you." Hayah advised Buba again about the danger of wild animals out there, as they ate Nyiri Maori Bihako Mboko from the same bowl. There was also chobble by the side. "Rearing cows is for children and women, young man. Our men are hunters and warriors. Believe me, we can take care of our women. No wild animal would dare harm any of them." "Very well, then," Hayah said, seeing that it was pointless to try to convince him. He didn't want to tell him about the incident that happened earlier on for the fear of upsetting him. While they were still eating, Buba called out for more water, and to Hayah's surprise, it was Fantah that brought it to them. As she knelt to give them the water, she stole a glance at him and then shyly looked away and smiled. Malam Buba saw what happened and told her something in full day that made her cringe, got up and went into the house in a hurry. She didn't look very happy. "So, my stranger, what brought you to these parts?" You don't look like you are from around here. Malam Buba asked. My name is Hayah ibn Sa'idi ibn Abdullah ibn Osman. I am the great-grandson of the Sheikh Osman the Great. I migrated from Sokoto to Fombina on my way to Makkah for pilgrimage, but along the way I was appointed the chief imam of Bulda by Lamdo Jere where I currently reside. I only go into the forest once in a while to be alone for some soul-searching and also to hunt for game, as it is a sport that I really love. Hunting is not a royal sport. I know. What am I doing? It suddenly dawned on him that Hayah was a very important man. Allah Rene Barkama. Buba said. Oh no Malam, you don't have to bother. I am a guest in your house and you have treated me very kindly. I appreciate that and I will never forget it. Thank you. No. Thank you and I shall be leaving now. No, Allah Rene, it is already dark and if I know Bulda, it is almost a full day's journey from here. Why don't you spend the night here and then leave in the light of day? I do not want to inconvenience you. No you won't. I will be honored to host you. And after a lot of persuasion, he finally convinced him to spend the night. Buba showed him to his own hut and instructed his wife to prepare the best delicacy for breakfast. At first light, the next day, Malam Buba killed 2 fowls and gave his wife to prepare food for their guest to take along with him on his journey back to Bulda, and he was outside getting ready when Fantah came from the back of the hut to meet him. Good morning, stranger. She squatted and greeted him while avoiding eye contact. Good morning, Fantah. He replied. You know my name, she asked. Yes. I believe you slept well. She said, without looking at him. Yes, I did. Your father was very kind. She didn't say anything. I shall soon be on my way. To where? She seems curious. Home. Home? Yes, home, Bulda. That is where I live. What do you do? I am a soldier, and I live in the palace. She glanced at him as if in disbelief, and he continued. I occasionally go out hunting for fun. Oh. She said. Well, I shall be off now. Will you come back again? Do you want me to come again? He asked, but she said nothing. Instead, she got up and ran out of the hut from the back and into her mother's hut and at that very moment Malam Buba came into the hut. Allah Rene, everything is ready. Yes, Malam Buba, and you don't have to address me so formally. Hayah replied, smiling. If you permit it, I will arrange an escort for you to ensure your safety. My safety is in the hands of Allah and I am glad He made me a warrior. Thank you for your concern, but that is not necessary. Do come to visit us again. Insha'Allah. With that, he left. Fantah peeped from an opening in the wall of her mother's room with her sister giggling beside her. Chapter 3. The village of Ndukula was slowly coming to life as Hayah rode out. It was a far cry from the town of Bulda where he currently resides and even less developed than the city of Marua. But it had a very peaceful atmosphere to it that he loved. The morning light had cast a calming grey shadow over the whole village. Young girls and boys led their herds of cattle towards the bush for grazing, disturbing the dust as they moved, and making the atmosphere even greyer. Some of the younger girls brightly dressed in red, black and white wrappers and short tops, adorned with many bangles and beads, were carrying large round calabashes filled with cow milk as they walked towards the neighboring towns to sell their wares and buy what they needed. A group of young men dressed in black jumpers and turbans and rubber shoes were heading westwards towards the forest to hunt. Some of the older men headed towards their farms. In all, everyone was busy with one thing or another and the town was a hustling and bubbling beehive by the time he left. All day long, he rode through the thick dense forest, passing a few other settlements on the way, because he took a different route on his way back, which wasn't strange. Being a warrior, he was very cautious after all. It was trickery, bravery, and tactfulness that got him to the position of general in the Lamdo of Marua's army, and he had since proven himself worthy of that position many times over. When he arrived at Marua a few years back, the Fulani, who were the ruling class, were at the height of their battle conflict with the original inhabitants, the Muscom, whom they referred to as the Habe, and the Muscom were winning. Being a fellow Fulani and a blue blood, the Lando of Marua welcomed him warmly like the prince he was, and because of that, he decided to enroll in the Lando's army to use his extensive military training to benefit him in the war with the Habe. He was favored by Providence, and the Lando put him in a position of command. That way, he was able to introduce his own tactics and military stratagem on the battlefield. It was a wise move, and his contributions helped to ensure their victory eventually. He also ensured that the soldiers carry out basic training exercises every day and always kept themselves combat ready even after the battle had been won, and to avoid being taken by surprise. He completely changed their military way of thinking. The Lando was so impressed with him that he made him a general and gave him his own daughter Talatu as wife and the small town of Balda to oversee. Because of his extensive knowledge of the Quran, he also served as the chief imam of the town. He led them in prayers in the town's central mosque and spent his free time in between battles, teaching Quranic knowledge to the citizens of Balda and the occasional visitors that showed interest. He arrived at Marua by sunset. It was a large town in contrast to the tiny village he had just left. For one thing, there were more people, more houses, and more activities, and it was more organized. There were lots of horses on the roads and shops and merchants lined the streets. It was a trading town and one of the largest in that region. As expected, there were an abundance of assorted goods and was available for buying and selling at every turn. Traders were constantly trying to attract the attention of prospective buyers as they yell loudly while describing the benefits of their wares, which were arranged in different eye-catching styles. Sometimes, it can be quite annoying, but he didn't mind, because he knew they generate the lion's share of the city's revenue. The houses were closely knit together and built with well-burnt red mud bricks in cone and square shapes instead of the dome-shaped huts of grass and straw of the Bororo. The people weren't a vibrant lot and better dressed than most of the indigenous tribes neighboring them. Also, there were diverse kinds of people, and the jobs they did to survive. It was a large pre-modern city. As the evening grew darker, the traders started closing their shops, about to retire for the day, with everyone in a hurry to go back to their homes. As he rode through the city, he could perceive the delicious smell of cooking from different houses, and it made him hungry. But he only grimaced and rode on. He had other pressing matters to discuss with the Lando of Marua. He knew that a feast would be waiting for him at the palace too. Usually, he visits the Lando every day whenever he was around, and they always ate dinner together. Balda was not far from Marua, so he made it a duty of paying homage to his Lando as often as possible. He came from a royal family, and so, he knew how important it was to be on the Lando's good side, especially after the disgrace he suffered back at home. Hayah, though an aristocrat, was essentially a loner by nature who liked doing things on his own terms and in his own way, which explains why he loved hunting so much. It gave him the time and freedom to be alone with his thoughts. He was also someone who loved to plan every action and did everything according to preset guidelines. Being alone helps him to organize his thoughts to come up with the necessary strategies to achieve his goals. Unfortunately, being a royal, he was always surrounded by people, and that really bugged him. There were always meetings, functions, and events to attend, leaving him with too little private time, and to make matters worse, the people expected him to follow certain rules and traditions instituted by long-gone kings and statesmen, of which he considered too rigid and archaic. His opinions, and sometimes, decisions, no matter how good they were disregarded so long as they do not conform to the preset norms. It was a big problem for him, for he was a man of strong opinions, considered by many as strong-headed and almost always at variance with many of his courtiers. At the end, he was forced by a faction in his court to abdicate the throne, and he left Sokoto into exile, shamed and angry, leaving behind his wife and children, without a whiff of regret. His wife was a cousin that was forced on him by his father, and he married her even though he never liked her or her parents. And so it happened, while he was battling for survival during the controversy that led to his abdication, she did not stand by him. Instead, she took the children and ran back to her parents whom he loathed. So, when he sneaked out of Sokoto, he left her behind. His secret intention was to return someday to take what was his birthright, the throne, but first he must learn patience. The how or when might be blurry, but the plan was crystal clear in his mind. He needed power and resources, both of which he didn't have at that moment. So, ingratiating himself with the Lamdo was a strategy to get him all that. And fortunately, the Lamdo liked him. He stopped at the royal mosque for Maghrib prayers, and the Lamdo was there too. After leading the prayers, they exchanged pleasantries with the Lamdo, who was very happy to see him as always. Then, they went into the palace together. Just as he expected, they were served a feast of royal dainties. The cooks must have outdone themselves, he thought. There was rice and milk with honey. Cooked lamb with vegetables, mai and torsh. Roasted chicken with hot yaji and bean soup. Oranges and bananas and mangoes arranged neatly in a beautifully carved calabash. At the end of the meal, they ate sweet dates specially imported for the Lamdo from Arabia by the Arab merchants that did business with the city of Marua. Everything was just so perfect he almost forgot why he was there. After dinner, the Lamdo informed him of the situation. They were able to discuss freely and unofficially, because the Lamdo considered him as his friend. He was not just his general but also his son-in-law, privileges, which qualifies him, in the eyes of the Lamdo, to be taken into confidence on important matters. The kingdom had been peaceful so far, but long silences in those parts and time could be equated to a calm before the storm. So, Hayah, how did the hunting go? Did you kill any game? The Lamdo asked him. It was a wonderful outing for sure. He replied. Oh, how so? I saw some interesting game, but caught none, Your Majesty. He didn't want to tell the Lamdo about Fantah. Oh, better luck next time. The Lamdo said before changing the subject. I received a report that the Musganawa had been launching secret guerrilla attacks here and there into my territory, lately. I knew the truce was a joke. Hayah was angry. They have joined forces with the Masa and Sumayya and have been causing a lot of damage to some of the smaller villages around. They have been attacking the caravans on their way to Diamere Market. They are trying to block our trading route. That will seriously affect our economy. Of course. Not to talk of serious damage to relations between us and Yola and Chiboa. I was informed that in the last attack, they killed over 12 people and stole their merchandise and horses. The more horses they have, the better their military will be. Hayah said, knowing that the Fulani's military superiority over the other tribes was mostly due to their possession of war horses. It gave them speed, cutting down fatigue, and a clear advantage over their opponents. Now it seemed like their enemies want to turn back the tide and even the playing field by acquiring their own horses too. They had been doing that a lot lately by sporadic, but organized attacks on traders and stealing their horses. Hayah knew it cannot continue, otherwise they would be in big trouble. We cannot afford to let them continue. We have to retaliate immediately. Yes. When do you think it will be appropriate? The day after tomorrow. I will gather my men and we will leave after dark. One of Hayah's biggest assets was his combat readiness at any given time, and that was why the Lamdo loved him so much. Okay. The Lamdo said. But I suggest we should try and have a peace talk with the Muslim chief first before any reprisal attack. He may not be aware of what is going on. For all we know, those attacks were sporadic and revenge-driven. Yes, Allah Renee. Hayah said. I will instruct the messengers immediately. Okay, good, the Lamdo replied, and then changed the subject again. Talatu has been worried sick about you. I am fine. Of course, but she couldn't understand why her groom of less than 2 weeks will just take off like that. What are you saying, Allah Renee? Do you suggest that I stay at home with her and never go out? No, of course not. How could I even begin to suggest that? You are a warrior who loves the outdoors. She will just have to understand. Allah Renee, Forgive me for being so direct. Hayah. The Lamdo cuts him off. I am an old man. My days on this earth are few. I gave you my daughter's hand in marriage because you are my friend and I trust you. I also believe you are capable of taking care of her even after my death. I was just speaking in my capacity as a father. I promise not to let you down. I trust you wouldn't. After the discussion, he left straight for Balder. It took Hayah 30 minutes of riding through the cold night to reach the town. And on arrival, he went straight to his house. On the way to his wife's apartment, he passed different concubines who knelt to greet him. There were about 6 of them of different sizes and shades. They were all very beautiful and he could have asked any one of them to join him in his room for the night if he wanted. It was his right as a traditional ruler to have his way with any of the concubines that he owned, but as tempting as that was, he would rather be with his wife. When he got to her quarters, he met with her uncle the waziri at the door, who had a habit of visiting her at odd hours and Hayah was not comfortable with it. But he couldn't say anything since he was his in-law.
Allah sabbine. Allah rene. Allah barunganyoma. The waziri greeted him in the customary royal way.
My in-law, how are you tonight? He returned the greetings, completely ignoring the praise that the waziri was lavishing him with. For some reasons, the man made him very nervous and he didn't like it. I am very well, Alarine. You look well. Thank you, Alarine. I just came to see my daughter. She was so worried. Worried? Hayah feigned surprise. She was just wondering if you were all right, that's all, but I assured her that she had nothing to worry about. You know she is only a child and doesn't know the ways of life that much, he stammered. You have done well, my in-law. Thank you. With that, he bade him good night and went inside before the conversation should be prolonged further. He didn't particularly like the man but there was nothing he could do about it since they were related by marriage. The Lamdo's daughter he married was raised by the waziri who was the Lamdo's older brother. For some reasons, the kingmakers deemed him not worthy of the throne and gave it to his younger brother. As if that was not enough, he couldn't bear any children, despite having 4 wives and numerous concubines. So, the Lamdo, out of pity and for the sake of peace, gave him his favorite daughter Talatu, to raise as his own, and at the height of their victory against the Muslims, the Lamdo asked him to marry her off to Hayah. He did that as a way of giving him a powerful in-law and increasing his power. In fact, the Lamdo did his best to carry him along and to increase his political influence, but often, he came off as pathetic and creepy, at least to Hayah. Hayah said Salamu alaikum softly and walked into his wife's luxurious room, fit for a princess. Everything about the room exudes royalty. The floor was covered with the softest of Persian rugs from Arabia, a gift from her father, Lamdo Garari. The walls were lined with beautiful murals and calligraphy of mixed tones. The ceiling was high and domed and also decorated with beautiful calligraphy. There were small windows around the room placed high up to allow enough light in, while maintaining privacy. There were different ceramic arrangements that gave the room an even more exquisite look. A very thick, but sweet-smelling fragrance filled the air. It was coming from a small clay incense burner sitting on a small table. The charcoals were glowing hot, and he could still see some of the wooden perfume that was sprinkled generously on it. The aroma was intoxicating. And at the far corner of the room, his wife, the princess, was sitting on the best raffia bed that money could buy. Its mattress was filled with feathers and covered by beautiful white and brown sheets imported from Egypt and surrounded by many soft feather pillows. She didn't look happy, he surmised. But as soon as she looked up and saw him, she got up off the bed and knelt to greet him. He said Salamu alaikum again and walked over to the bed to sit beside her. Her head was bowed down. She was shy, so he cupped her face in his hands and lifted it up so that their eyes could meet. She smiled, and shyly looked away. She was very beautiful, the most beautiful of all the Lamdo's daughters. He canoodled her face again. She had an oval face, a pointed nose, and soft luscious lips. Her long soft black hair was skillfully braided and covered with a transparent veil adorned with jewelry. He felt so lucky to have been blessed with such a beautiful wife. He didn't love her, but he liked her and was grateful to the Lamdo for giving her to him. He then lifted her up and sat her next to him on the bed. That night, as his wife slept peacefully next to him, he was wide awake, and his mind wandered off to the little village north of Marua and the beautiful shepherd girl he met there. Somehow, he couldn't get her off his mind. He remembered her innocent smile and the sweet sound of her voice, and all he wanted at that time was to be with her. The next morning, Hayah had a meeting with his lieutenants to brainstorm on the best strategy to adopt in dealing with the problem at hand. There were many suggestions. Some wanted a preemptive strike while others suggested more negotiations and threats, since they were not sure if it was indeed the Muslims who were actually carrying out the attacks. By the end of the day, they agreed to invite the Muslim chief and elders for a peace dialogue. He relayed that to the Lamdo and the Lamdo gave his approval. The day after that, Hayah sent 2 messengers to the Sakin Muslim inviting him to the Lamdo's palace for a peaceful dialogue. Later that evening, one of the messengers came back covered in blood. He was beaten and roughened up. He told them of how the other messenger was killed and the Sakin Muslim spared him so that he could deliver his message. "We will not surrender. We are ready for you." From that moment, it was agreed that a war will take place and they were going on the offensive. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy this story, please like, share and subscribe.